All right, today we are welcoming Lindsay to the Shift Happens podcast, and we've got some interesting things in store for you guys today. So, welcome on.
Hi, Kayla. I'm so grateful to be here. What an honor. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Of course, I would love to dive into before everything kind of shifted for you. I mean, you had the title, you had the career, and you had the on paper success, but something still felt off. So, take us into that. What did your normal days look like back then?
Yeah, wow, you're bringing me back. I already feeling the turning in my stomach at just
Oof.
reflecting. No, all good things. I come from the world of advertising, and I started in account management at a great ad agency in Chicago. I was climbing the ladder. I was getting all the accolades, and I was getting a lot of, I don't want to say fulfillment because it wasn't fulfillment, but like I was getting, I guess, like the high off of it because I was
Yeah.
doing really well. I was very good at my job. But I knew quite early on. So this is like a good, like a day in the life. Well, this is like maybe a slightly abnormal day, but like kind of normal in advertising. It was the holidays, and back in like I don't know, guys, like 2013 or 14 or something like that. We're going it back. And we would have to work all hours, and it was like Christmas Eve or something like that. And here we are trying to launch this massive campaign for this telecom company. And I'm working at home because it's too cold. We can't even leave the house in Chicago. That cold. And I'm on the phone with like a creative, very senior creative guy, levels above me. And we need to get this stuff out to this client. And I remember like so focused on the work. And I just hear in the background his son being like, "Dad, can you play with me now?"
Mm.
And this creative director being like, "Soon, I'll be right there. I just got to finish up work."
Yeah.
And I remember it was kind of one of those like screech moments of like I don't want that. And it kind of put things into perspective. Not, looking around like it just I was like, I realized that I don't want to be my boss's boss's boss.
Right.
I don't want to be at the level where I'm on the phone with some junior person trying to get things done around Christmas to send to a client. Like things in perspective didn't line up. So that was what happened a lot in the day to day was like I'd be running around so busy. So because you are so busy in a job like this, so much stress, and there would be
Right.
joy and creativity and things like that. But then there'd be these moments where you're like, wait, what am I doing this for? And like pause. And I would just feel in my gut this like career ache, is what I call it.
Right.
Like something just didn't feel right, but I didn't know what. And I also didn't really believe that I could just not like get off this track. Like I'm climbing
Yeah.
the ladder. Every box is being checked. Like this is the right thing to do, right? So I just ignored it for a long time until I really couldn't ignore it anymore.
Yeah. It's almost like you're stuck on that ladder. Once you start climbing, you're like, oh, well, I already made it this far. So why would I get off of this ladder? I'm stuck here. So is that kind of what it felt like?
Yeah, I mean, I think things are different now, right?
Yeah.
I think we're post COVID and a lot of different things, but often society doesn't uh, teach you that it's
Mm.
safe to get off that ladder. Like I don't think we're,
Mm.
and especially there's just a lot of fear from parents or society that if you try to deviate from something safe and secure, it could be really risky, maybe not worth it. And I felt that, and it was just kind of like, but if I don't know what else there is, then why would I stop? Why would I stop at this? Like, it's not bad. It's okay. It's good enough, right? Like that idea,
Right.
like you rationalize. I think people rationalize
Yeah.
a lot because we prefer the comfort of the current discomfort, the known discomfort, even though it's not
Yes.
comfortable at all, versus the unknown discomfort of going after something that might actually lead to something so much better for you. And it took me a long time to get there. And I don't regret at all of my time of my near decade plus 12 plus
Yeah.
years in the crazy world of advertising because it taught me so much. It allowed me to be what I am now and being able to be on the other side of the table supporting leaders in those positions to find the clarity and find the self connection to lead themselves differently through their careers to find out
Yeah.
what they truly need. But I do look back at little Lindsay and I'm like, oh, you had like no idea how
Yeah.
to understand what was happening around you, what that was doing to you until it got to a point where I couldn't ignore it. And what I mean by that is the stress, the anxiety, the turning away
Right.
from myself to turn towards achievement, to turn towards impressing other people, to doing what I should do versus what was in most respect to myself.
Right. I feel like that naturally just took us to your shift happens moment. And I know that you said possibility over fear. That is huge. So show us what that looked like. Did you have this moment of like, okay, this is it. I'm done. This is my line in the sand?
You know what, Kayla, I'm going to ask listeners to be patient because I want to break this down, how I got to
Yeah.
that like ultimate, because I think it's important. I usually skip over the first part, but I think we have to kind of see the rock bottom to get to
Yes.
to understand what gets us to the place like the rising, as like Glennon Doyle talks about a lot. Uh, Fast forward years later from this like Christmas, like aha moment, and just ignored it, kept going. I went to London, I came back, like everything was still going great, but I still had that ache. I knew I needed to do something for something different to happen. I had no idea. Like I just knew something had to change. That's when I began coach training and I started to be coached. I started to learn how to coach. And that's when, and I'm sure, maybe we'll get more into this later, but that's when I learned how to truly like lead myself and get curious with myself and understand myself and like had a different level of self-awareness and like language for things I was experiencing.
Right.
But then COVID hits and I was going through coaching certification as well as running the biggest business I've ever ran during a crazy time
Yeah.
with like everything is, we're doing like, it's not worth getting into, just tons of stuff. So I'm working nonstop for the agency work. I'm trying to coach and learn in any spare moment that I have. And it was too much. So there was a moment I was visiting my brother in California and he had kind of pointed out to me, he's like, you were maybe like a workaholic or something. Cause I was like nonstop, like with him. He's like, do you want to go to the dog park with like my little pup Moses? And I was like, no, I got to finish this. He's like,
Right.
what are you doing? So I was like, I'm not a workaholic. Well, the next day, working away, and I get a phone call from one of my really close friends, boyfriends, and he calls to tell me that my friend's brother had passed away very unexpectedly. And they were calling me to hope to inform the other friends what had happened, to let them know, make sure. And I know before we got on here, Kayla, we're talking a little bit about grief. I have my own story with grief. Grief is like often it's very easy to tap into a place of like compassion, empathy that like breaks me down when I realize what other people are going through. And I think I was so wound tight and so overwhelmed. I didn't know. I got up to that point, kept myself so well, closed up, I guess, or like
Yeah.
composed, I think is the other way to
Yeah.
say. And coaching was starting to like bring out a vulnerability I thought I had, but definitely didn't. But in this moment, I got this news and I just sat there and it was a collapse. I collapsed. I went into
Yep.
total, emotional breakdown and went to my brother. I was just like bawling and he was like, okay,
Yeah.
like something's not working here. Like you need to take the rest of the day off. And it ultimately led for me to taking 2 weeks off. And I went alone in a forest in the mountains of Asheville, yada, yada, yada. That was incredible. And it allowed me to like just have freedom for a moment and actually be with
Right.
myself. And it made me realize I did need to start to get out of the industry and really lean into coaching or something in that realm. And so when I came back, it's very easy to get stuck back into things. So although I had
Oh
this
yeah.
aspiration, I still didn't have the path in front of me.
Right.
Like, do I go on my own? Do I try to find an HR job? Do I try to go like, there's like a million things. Like I didn't know what to do. I just knew I had to do something. And I still had that confusion and I was still quite burned out. One day, to avoid trying to figure out what to do and my stuckness, I'm like scrolling Instagram as we do.
Yep.
And I see this quote from Michelle Obama come up. And she says, don't ever make a decision from a place of fear, only make it from a place of hope and possibility.
Oh.
Make the decision based on what should happen, not what shouldn't.
Oh, that's so good.
And right, like stop me in
Yeah.
my tracks. I was like, oh, and in coaching, we learn how to step into different perspectives to get
Right.
out of stuckness, to like shift our mindsets and start to see things differently. And I was like, okay, well, what if I looked at going off on my own, starting my own coaching business,
Yeah.
or continuing my business, which I had on the side, from a place of possibility? What would it be? And I just thought about freedom. Like I have no idea what I could build and how I could, be doing something that feels like it's so aligned with my purpose all the time. And,
Yeah.
like just honoring my values in a way that I can't do in this corporate world. And all these things that just like seemed abundant. The possibilities seemed abundant. And then I said, well, if I made this decision whether to stay or go from a place of fear, what does that look like? And I immediately was like, oh, I mean, I wouldn't do it because the fears can be abundant, but they're
Right.
also the different type of abundance. It's like abundance down to like the scarcity, horrible dark hole of something bad.
Right.
But it became so clear to me. I'm like, oh, of course, like the perspective of possibility is turning towards myself, and the perspective of fear is not believing in myself and walking myself down a path that I know exactly what it's going to look like in 10 years, how I'm going to feel. And that's not a person that I want to be. And I deserve a different chance than that. So that is what set me off on my eventually transition from leaving the agency world to my full business of coaching and leadership development facilitation. And I haven't looked back since.
I love it. It was like you needed that moment of just stillness to take off the work mask, to take off the I have it together mask. All of these masks had to come off, and you needed to just sit with Lindsay and be like, who am I and what do I actually want? Not somebody else, not my boss, not their boss. What do I want? And I love when these types of situations happen for women and then they realize,
Mhm.
oh, okay, I do have possibilities. And like you said, that fear can sometimes outweigh the possibilities. And you're like, well, basically, which ladder do I now climb? But you went for the possibility one. So I love that moment for you.
Thank you. And I think you said something really important around the stillness. And that was really important. And that is something that I think is especially hard in these days because we're moving so fast. Women have so many responsibilities and hats to wear. I think
Yeah.
we are often the last ones to put ourselves at the top of a list of needing some stillness and space.
Yeah.
But it's probably the greatest gift we can give ourselves that we never do. It was and that was a big thing my brother actually said to me during this moment. He was like, if you want something new and you want the clarity, you have to create the space for it to come to you. You can't expect to keep living at the same pace, doing the same thing, and just expect that you're going to get this like grand aha or the right
Right.
opportunity. It doesn't happen that way. It never does. Like you have to create the space for you to be uncomfortable, create the space for you to be in creativity, create the space to be in connection with yourself or others, like for
Yep.
something new, in order for shifts to be able to really happen.
Yeah. I actually did some work with a past guest of mine. Her name's Laura Ora, and she did this exercise where she was like, if you're imagining a room with like every excuse is taken away and you get to
Mm,
do the thing, like what is left? And mine was empty. And we thought that it was really interesting. However, she pointed out, like, you just need some space for you then. Like, you need space to be because I'm a mom of five. We
yes.
have a landscaping company. I have a podcast. I do content creation. I do brand deals. Like there's just so many things constantly
Yeah.
happening all the time. And I was like, you know what? And that was also my wake up moment of being like, I've been so far on the back burner, I didn't even know I was on the stove anymore. So
Oh,
I feel
wow.
like that can happen to us so easily in today's society.
That's so interesting that you saw emptiness and that you
Yeah.
then said, oh, you need some space or stillness. Because I actually like my first initial reaction to I saw emptiness was like, oh wow, like I got a sense of like no at all like judgment or anything to you, just so that I'd answer of that's like, is that like a sign of disconnection or like not knowing
Yeah.
what you want, like you
Right.
said. But
Yep.
then when I thought about it a little bit more as you were talking, it's like, well, actually, emptiness is not a showing of a lack of something. Maybe it's a craving of something that you need, like a
Yep.
craving of like serenity and more of like peace and spaciousness versus something missing. I don't know if I'm
Absolutely.
articulating that right, but I think that that is like a very beautiful realization to have and
Yeah.
looking at it from a place of what can I give myself versus is there something missing here?
Right. It's funny you said that because there was actually somebody else who had an empty space, but hers was different than mine. And
Mm,
mine was that need of just having that space for me to be like, whoa, I have something for me and all these little roles and hats that I wear. So that was an interesting point. Now,
that's so
you said something that I absolutely love, that you learned how to lead yourself for the first time. So, what does that mean to you?
yeah. I I think that we don't talk enough about self-leadership or somehow I feel like sometimes I'm taking crazy pills because I'll like bring up self-leadership to people and they're kind of like, well, what? Whatever. Or they don't think about it in
Yeah.
a very serious way. And I think it's honestly one of the most important things that we could do for ourselves because we are always leading us. Everyone is a leader. Whether you
Right.
have a corporate role or whether you are in a family or whether you are navigating your career or you have a landscaping business or a podcast, like you are leading yourself and you're leading something. Self leadership comes from deep self connection, which we just talked about is often
Right.
something that is sorely lacking because we put our attention so much onto other people or our perception of ourselves to other people rather than our connection and perception of ourselves and understanding of ourselves. And so
Right.
as I was moving through this kind of whole career ache navigation, needing something different, and I started to do coach training through Coactive Training Institute. I mentioned this earlier, but you get coached by a lot of people. You're going through all of the work that you are learning how to take others through. And it was the first time in my life that I was introduced to questions and concepts of what are your values? What did that
Absolutely.
actually mean? What role
Yep.
do they play in your life? If you have a larger purpose based on the impact you want to have on others, your unique impact, what is that? And
Yeah.
is the work you're doing actually allowing you to do that into your full potential, which mine was not. And that's where that ache was coming from. I just knew I could have a greater impact and just greater, personal success and fulfillment
Yeah.
in something different. And I just didn't know what that was. So through this, and also I'll say one other concept, through the understanding and the separation of the different voices in our head, whether saboteurs, whether it's like parts work,
Oh yeah.
and being able to know the difference of like, what is my thoughts, my inner like wisdom and truth and perspective versus that of fear and anxiety and people pleasing and control and a lot of things that are very natural to protect ourselves but often end up sabotaging ourselves. So
Right.
through this introduction and understanding all of this, it just was like a breath of fresh air of who I am, who is
Yeah.
Lindsay, and it
Right.
changed the way I started to lead my team, my clients. It changed how I started to navigate my career, hence why I was even able to start to get some of this clarity and make the shift.
Right.
So to lead yourself is to understand yourself, and it gives you agency, it gives you control and power, not over, but power of understanding how to move through the world with integrity as it means for you, and able to make decisions that are in service of yourself, of the impact you want to have on others with full awareness versus always looking outward. You're able to start to actually look inward to move
Right.
yourself.
I have something interesting just came to mind is going through those different seasons. How did self leadership look different from how you were taught to either lead in business or I know there's different seasons of life. So how does self leadership look different in all of these different areas?
That's such a great question. So I think early on in my corporate world in life, maybe pre like self leadership awakening, maybe. Um, I wouldn't say I wasn't not leading myself. I was doing very well, but like I was very conscious to what was important to me in terms of my relationships, how I was managing people, nurturing the talent in other people. Like
Yeah.
I looked at what my perception was in the agency and what I was known for. And it was all things I'm very proud of. So I was still somewhat honoring myself. However, it was very much driven by external validation through
Mm.
achievement,
Yeah.
through, the feedback I would get, through the promotions I would get, through the salary I was making. So it's all these external markers. So I would say, although I was leading myself pretty well, I was leading in service of something that is more of like the artificial happiness. We think that these
Yeah.
like circumstances make a difference in how we feel in our life. And more often than not, they don't. They're just like the next milestone that like society or other people tell us is like the right thing to do. So there's a lot of like shoulding on myself. I should achieve that. I should do that because it's going to make this person happy. I should. Right. And then through the next season of more senior corporate leadership, and as I was starting to actually have the awareness to lead myself differently, it was a lot more empowerment. It was a lot more consistency. I remember I had a boss, and after I named my values, I started to use them in language a lot. And transparency was big because your values can change and evolve. So at the time, transparency was like in respect really two really big values for me. And I would talk about it all the time. I want to be transparent here. Can we have a transparent conversation? I'm sharing this out of transparency. I'm disappointed because I didn't get the transparent, right? I used it in my language and got feedback from my boss of, wow, like you're so consistent in your like leadership values, your leadership,
Yeah.
whatever. And that was when it was like a reinforcement of like, oh, okay, this really works. And
Right.
so it was like this, self leadership then was kind of like understanding my agency and my impact in a different way, that I was like, I have control here. And I was able to understand situations differently. So hard situations with clients, hard situations in my family, with friends, I was able to look at them from the perspective through either values or my own narratives and like, coping mechanisms or things like that. So I could understand them and like respond
Yeah.
versus react. So it like started to shift how I manage like my nervous system and present and manage conversations in a way that are much more productive versus
Yeah.
reactive and emotional. And then I would say self leadership looks very different in my own business because there's a whole different level of accountability of what
Right.
success looks like. And I think there's the freedom of being able to define what really does success look like for me now. Personally, my business is huge, but also scary when you go your whole life with somebody else doing that for
Right.
you.
Yep.
So I think some of the greatest leadership comes in keeping perspective and in that it's okay for it to be unknown. It's okay for it to be a little bit scary. It's okay for me to feel like I'm not achieving what feels good enough because I went my whole life believing certain markers are the right achievement and I'm still
Right.
unlearning that. So it's leading myself by a lot of grounding into what's important to me now.
I love that you said unlearning that. And I was actually about to ask you if there were any values that you had to unlearn during this process. Like, wait, that's not exactly a value, because just to give her credit as well, it was in an episode with Katie
Mm.
Rip during the Shift Happens IRL series. She spoke about how women like were so fast to be like, oh, family, that's my value. But is it really? Or is it the connection or time with your kids or, something like that? So was there a moment for you during all of this where you were like, yeah, I've probably been living completely out of alignment with this one.
First of all, I'm so glad you brought that up about values because I experience that a lot with my clients of
Yeah.
they go to a place of like aspirational or like um a place of like feeling obligated, like yes of course
Yes.
my
Yeah.
family, or it's like you can still like we all value family, you not everyone, but like you
Yeah.
can still love and value your family, but that doesn't have to be like one of your precious core values.
Yes.
um, as for myself, I'm trying to think if there is a value that I felt was off. I want to say no. Instead, I have learned how to see how my values have evolved into what they truly are.
Yeah.
Or like, so for example, I talked about respect and integrity, or respect and transparency. And now I've learned in time that those are really just part of a greater value of integrity. And similarly, like I had a value, this might be a good example. Around like dependability and reliability. And that, especially during COVID and my wedding, that was like a big thing that I realized I valued because I was struggling with some stuff. And when I went to really interrogate the value, I realized there's like the shadow side of it. And that, and I'll get into that. Like to me, dependability is about me like being there when people really truly need me, showing up for the moments that matter. That is like what it means to me. It's not that I will be on the call at exactly the time that it starts or I will respond to your email right away. Like it's about being there, knowing that if someone needs something, I will be there. I will show
Yeah.
up. I will hold the space or give the advice or, give you the hug or like I want to turn towards and help. Um, and I think I realized that the shadow side of dependability during this season was like, and that I was like, I looked back and was like, I was so dependable. I was like the one always there and arranging things and this and that. And that wasn't actually in service of my value. That was out of fear
Right.
because I didn't want to be left out or I wanted to be liked. It was coming from a very much a pleasing, fear driven place.
Right.
And that isn't values driven. And so when the time came when I wanted other people to show up for me and it wasn't coming to fruition the way I wanted, there was a lot of anger and pain. And I think there was some dishonoring of a value in there, but I think it was also
Yeah.
a lot of reciprocity and like disappointment that wasn't necessarily the most values aligned. It was more fear driven or judgmental.
Yeah. It's the shadow side of it is so real. I know in parenting, I found myself before I even got into mindset work and just all the things, before I shifted my own life, I was very triggered by lying, or if my kids told
Mm.
even just like a little white lie or a half truth, because I mean, that's still lying, I would literally just lose it. I don't like it at all. I would think that it was out of disrespect or because I wanted respect. But truly, it goes back to finding out I had a biological dad at 12 years old and never getting true
Totally.
answers. And so I think that when I have to look at the shadow side of it, it was like, wait, Kayla, you are getting so mad at your child right now for no reason when really it's on you for the way that you're responding out of that
Yeah.
fear, out of that fear of being lied to, out of that fear of being misled or manipulated in a certain way. And yeah, it's very interesting when you look at the underneath the shadow, as you said, of your values and what you believe.
Yeah, that's like so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And it's so true. That's why I think that's why this work is so important. That's why when any
Right.
client, any leader comes to me, I'm not like, okay, I'm going to help you get your promotion. It's like, no, no, no. We're going to like do the foundational work for to transform the way you lead yourself and others because it's exactly that. Because the greater awareness you have and the way you're able to like
Yep.
name things about yourself, just like your values, the way you're able to open up bigger questions and curiosities and like hopefully get out of a place of like shame and reactivity and more of
Right.
a place of like curiosity of like why am I reacting this way? And then you start pulling the
Exactly.
thread, you're like, wait, and then you start to
Yeah.
rethink. Then you're able to show differently. And then you're changing the way the experience your kid is getting. And then you're like healing generational stuff, right? So
Yep.
like that's where like real big work happens, but it has to start with you. So that's why I say self leadership is so important because I do truly believe that you cannot really powerfully lead others, like your family, like your kids or your team, if you first do not know how to lead yourself or at least have the connection where you're in awareness of how you're leading yourself. Because that stuff
Absolutely.
trickles down. And if we're blind to it, then you're reacting and like shaming for white lies when in reality you just need to shift your perspective and understand this is more about you than about them. And that's what
Yeah.
most situations are when we are feeling reactive. And that's why values are so powerful. And like I work with my clients a lot. You seem very frustrated with this person, with this situation. Let's talk. What value are they dishonoring? Okay. So is this really about you? Is this about them? How can you then respond or manage it in honor of your values? So then at least you're able to start to understand and then move through with greater integrity or greater respect to yourself, to the relationship, to the person, and start to like rise above it, which is it's a thing to do.
Absolutely. It is a process. And that's why I love that you just mentioned when you meet with somebody, you're not like, oh, yeah, we're just going to get you that promotion. We have to start here. And I feel like a lot of times, especially in the age of social media and highlight reels,
Yeah.
we see somebody that got the next step and we're like, must be nice. Really cool job. Oh, she has that mindset down. Great. That's great for her. But something that we don't talk about enough is that messy middle because that space is equally important because you're leaving what wasn't working and then you're trying to step into what's next but you're not quite there yet. And I think that's the part that people are afraid to share because they're like, "Oh wait, what if I don't make it there? I'm going to go back." Or what I just want to share once I do make it there. But no, we have to keep going. It is a process and I feel like a lot of people quit here. So, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a good mention to mention like this is a process. It takes work. It's not just going to like you can't just like snap your fingers and it's good to go.
Yeah, and the messy middle is such a messy place to be in,
Yes.
and that's often when people come to me, like they are in it and they're like, I don't see the other side of it yet. I look back and I can't go back there. And I know I need something to be different. I don't know what to do. I'm really stuck in it.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to imagine things better or different when you are very overwhelmed, when you are very lost, you are very upset or fear driven, or just like in that kind of paralyzing stuckness. And I tell people, and this is the same work I had to do, you have to slow down and go back, create that
Yes.
space we were talking about, create the capacity to start to invite in a different awareness of your situation, of yourself, start to reconnect. Because as a coach, I'm not someone who's going to give you the answers of what to do. No one
Right.
should. That's the problem. You might have been looking to others to help you and you can't do that. So, but you have to create the capacity and the self understanding and as well as the self compassion to get the clarity that you want from yourself, to get the answers for yourself. And a lot of people are afraid to do that work. A lot of people just want the answers fast. They want the person to create their resume, help them
Yep.
find the job. And I say, that's what you want. That's people are out there, and that is
Yep.
great. Just know that what I have learned is that people end up often in the same situation again because you're not getting to the root of what's actually motivating these behaviors, like what's causing these relationship issues, which is causing you to end up feeling undervalued. Like you're just going to be the same person, the same perspectives in a new environment. And so that isn't going to do much to make some massive transformation. But I will talk a little bit more about the messy middle of, I feel like I'm in a messy middle right now, and that's very hard.
Yeah.
I mentioned to you, Kayla, that I'm pregnant. I'm about 7 months pregnant now, due in a couple months. And it has been like a very, very difficult pregnancy for me. And I just spoke in a great conversation with one of my dear friends, Ronnie Dickerson Stewart, around how to lead yourself when you feel lost from yourself and disconnected.
That's so good.
And yeah, like I'm sure like all of your guests have felt this way.
Yeah.
And me in the springtime in May, I was pregnant and then I found out I was pregnant. Then I got super, super sick. And I've been sick my whole pregnancy, but I was,
Yeah.
for the first couple of months, was like, couldn't move out of bed. My whole life flipped upside down. Couldn't run my business. I couldn't go for walks. I couldn't eat. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do anything. And I had never, ever had lived life that way or seen myself that way or been in that type of
Yeah.
very difficult, almost, I would even say probably depressed state.
Yeah.
And I was in a messy middle that I had never, ever been in before.
Yeah.
And it just gave me a perspective of that I haven't had in a long time. Very different than the other, like a messy uncertainty points, because when you're in that dark of a hole, it's hard to imagine any light on another side. And what helped me through that, if it's helpful for others, is like just had to consistently remind myself that even though I don't believe it, this truly is temporary. And to ground, like once I had a bit of the capacity, how do I bring myself back to the practices that help me reconnect myself? Like for some people, maybe it's journaling, maybe it's going for walks, maybe it's talking to a friend, maybe it's listening to a meditation, maybe it's
Right.
talking about values or returning to like a book or a podcast that really like makes you feel hopeful again. And that's what I had to do. I had to go back to my own playbook that I do with clients
Right.
to say, how do I start to regain perspective here to move through this versus just letting this happen to me and getting lost in it?
Right. I think that shows the importance of having a playbook that you can kind of refer back to for
Yeah.
yourself, and also these skills and even
Mm-hmm.
coaches, podcasts, books. However, I feel like I have to insert this here is that with that, sometimes I find people can get stuck there in the self-awareness spot. And that's why with my
Mm.
shift method, it starts as self-awareness, but it doesn't, there's four more steps after that. And people can get so stuck on the why or why did this happen? And that
Mhm.
was where I was for a very long time. And guess what it was doing to me? Absolutely ruining me and what was going on. It was pouring out in other spaces as well. So I
Yeah.
feel like at some point, you have to move away from that self awareness spot and move into okay, what am I going to do about this now? And that is where these tools and coaching
Yes.
and personal playbooks come into play, is when you're like, okay, let me refer back. This is what works for me. This is what doesn't. But you can't get stuck in the self awareness. It is a a very important skill to have is self-awareness. However, if you get stuck there too long, you're always going to be stuck in the why and not the how.
I think it's all, I'm so glad you said that. And I think it's a difference of self-awareness versus like if it's coming from a place of curiosity, which
Oh
can be
yeah.
expansive, versus a place of like judgment, whether judgment of self, judgment of others, judgment of circumstances, which is usually not coming actually from you. It's coming from a different part of yourself or a saboteur, like basically a coping mechanism to try to make you
Right.
feel safe and like protect yourself. So that's the shadow side of the self-awareness and self-work, is
Yes.
getting stuck in that. And if you're working with a good coach, and that's what's powerful about working with partners or bringing other people in to the journey, because they're the ones that can hold up the mirror or intrude and
Right.
say, wait, this is the same story.
Yep.
This sounds like it's coming from something. Where is it coming from? Doesn't seem like you. Now let's try on something different. Now what's the action to take to move this forward? You are absolutely right. And when we're stuck in like that cycle or cyclone of that, I
Yeah.
don't think that's coming from like our wise, self-loving, like trusted place, our truly inner
Right.
leader. I think it's coming from a place of self-protection and fear.
Right. And I think we gotta remember that coaches are human too. And like you said, you can't give the answer. So Sometimes we take away that human label, but you help leaders become more human. So what does that actually look like in real life?
Yeah. So I work with folks whether they are navigating how to their professional, development within a job, whether they want to leave the job, whether they're feeling uncertain if they should stay in their career or make a big change. They're kind of at an inflection point, whether in their actual job or within themselves, of like something's not working anymore. They're kind of like
Yeah.
me. They got to a certain point in a ladder. They're looking around. They're like, how did I get here? I want to move forward, but in a way in service of myself. And I don't know how to do that. And so I partner with them and coach them to like walk beside them to do a lot of what I talked about today. Start with deeper self awareness and understanding of the foundation of who you are. What does that mean for you as a leader? And how does that translate into how you can start to look at your future differently and what you require, how you're honoring your needs, your requirements, your values so much differently in service of yourself. So it's a transformational process that I take clients through. And in addition to that, I'm also a leadership development speaker. I partner with corporations and teach leaders how to be more human in the workplace. I think to sum it up
Yes.
using your language, teaching them how to lead through their values, how to manage those voices in their head that are sabotaging them and making them think they're not good enough, how to use real, how to build more meaningful connection in the work so people are feeling more seen and heard and valued. So, just trying to bring more of this into the corporate setting because we are whole humans and we deserve to
Yes.
connect as humans and we deserve to feel respected and understood. And that is not happening enough these days.
That's actually one of my favorite things about what I do. And we talked a little bit about this before we got on, but this is the reason why I don't do grand intros or I don't sit
Mm.
here and list all your credentials before we get into it because let's be honest, some people could take a whole 5 minutes with their credentials. And for me, I love humanizing the person behind the microphone and being like, listen, we are humans behind this thing. We had to do some dirty, messy middle work to get where we're at. And that's why I love to just take that completely out of it. I don't even do like a doctor or whatever. I go with Lindsay. You're Lindsay to me. And I
Mm.
love to get into who is Lindsay because we can look at the coaching side, but I love to get into the nitty gritty underneath. So I would love for right now for somebody listening who feels that same ache that you once did, who's ever
Mm.
looked at their dream life and been like, why doesn't it feel like mine? What would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them first off, it's okay to look at that and feel lost, and starting from a place of self compassion and acceptance. That's one of the greatest gifts that I have gifted myself through my continued coach education and my own self work has been to develop a practice of mindful self compassion and recognizing that it is okay to show up for yourself with loving kindness
Yeah.
and that is not dulling your knife or your motivation, or it's actually going to make you so much stronger of a human, of a professional. So I would start from that place of just pure self-compassion of like
Yeah.
it's okay, right? Like it's okay. And what do you need right now? And can you give that to yourself with putting your hand on your heart and just saying like, this is hard. I feel lost and this is hard. And I'm looking around and this doesn't feel right. And then give yourself the opportunity of that stillness in that space. How do you say no to something so you can start to say yes to yourself? Whether that is more time to read some books or to set up some sessions like intro sessions with coaches or to just walk in a forest and journal or just sit and like write notes about what doesn't feel right and what does feel right in your life. But how do you compassion first and then creating capacity for yourself to hopefully allow in a little bit of clarity to know how you can move forward to start to turn your life in a direction that makes you feel proud. That is your dream life versus someone else's that you brought to fruition.
Yeah. I love that. Where can my audience connect with you outside of this podcast episode if they're looking for their own coaching or even if they just want to say hi?
Well, I would love to hear from anyone and everyone. So you can either connect with me on LinkedIn under Lindsay Yellin or on Instagram, just Lindsay Yellin, all one word. And I have a newsletter that is called Grounds for Growth, where I share leadership insights and inspiration every week or so. And I also just launched a podcast called Unfiltered Leadership, where I have conversations like this all on with whether it's solo or with a guest, just trying to have like get to the human side of leadership and talk about the messy corners and like hidden corners of leadership that we don't always talk about, but that make the biggest difference and are the most prevalent. I'm trying to bring more, make people feel less alone in their journeys through this new endeavor. And I invite people to join and listen.
Well, I want to thank you so much for sitting down with us today, taking time out of your day to share all of this. I think this is a really jam packed episode of where you've been, what happened, how you got out of it. And I love that we got into that messy middle. We brought in every aspect of it and really humanized the coach behind the coaching. So thank you.
Thank you. This has been honestly such an honor and joy. And I so hope that everyone listening got a little nugget from it, but I know that I got a lot from you, Kayla. So thank you so much for inviting me on and for this beautiful opportunity.
Of course, all the links will be in the show notes. And don't forget, take what you need, leave the rest.